Hello and welcome to the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies here at Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, California. I am welcoming you to the first Lavender of 2025, the title of which is The Rainbow in the Seventh-Day Adventist Church with Chris Ngugi. Welcome to our program. Before we begin, and I say more about the title and topic and speaker for today's program, let me just do some housekeeping, if I might. The first is that this event is being recorded for future posting on our socials. It's also being live streamed on Facebook. And so know that we will record this, but we will not record nor post anything from the chat box. And let me see. And again, my name is Bernie. I use he, his pronouns, and I'm thrilled to welcome you here today. So again, the title of our Lavender Lunch is The Rainbow in the Seventh-Day Adventist Church, and our speaker is Chris Ngugi. Today, Chris, who uses he, him pronouns, a member of the Seventh-Day Adventist Church, will be sharing with us his ministry with the Rainbow Room, a space in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is home to Andrews University, a Seventh-day Adventist institution. The Rainbow in the Room is designed for community members and professional presenters to gather and discuss what it means to care for our LGBTQ plus neighbors in an informed way while respecting cultural, religious, and political differences, all within the context of a Christian denomination, which is non-LGBTQ affirming. Our speaker today is Chris Ngugi. Chris is in his final year of undergraduate studies at Andrews University, which, as I mentioned, is a Seventh-day Adventist university in Berrien Springs, Michigan. And he is studying pre-law with a double major in pre-professional psychology and Spanish language, literature, and culture. Welcome, Chris. We're honored to have you with us today. Chris is also an undergraduate research scholar whose passion project is a qualitative study of the religiosity and LGBTQ plus identity of emerging adults across Seventh-day Adventist colleges and universities. And above all, Chris says he desires to serve God and others with all the nuance that means for him and for others in his community. So again, welcome everybody. And Chris, a special welcome to you.
Thank you so much for your wonderful introduction. Thank you for having me here to present for this Lavender lunch. Right now it's actually 4 because I'm in Michigan, so I'm not having lunch, but I am definitely enjoying this time to have this lunch with you. We're going to be able to talk about some complicated subjects that have to do with the ways in which people in this space, a Seventh-day Adventist non-affirming space, are engaging in the community when it comes to care for LGBTQ plus individuals and other queer folks in our area, in our community, in our church overall. So I'm actually going to share my screen and start my presentation in just a moment here. I'm going to replace the current share. Here we are. Okay, is everyone able to see my screen? Fantastic. Okay, then let's talk about the rainbow in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So before we begin, I want to really take this time to acknowledge, to really point out the fact that I am incredibly cognizant of the fact that the subject may be something that is not the most comfortable to talk about. We're going to be talking about a non-affirming Christian denomination, one that I am currently still an active member of. And we're going to even be touching on subjects such as recent forms of potential conversion therapy, being in an environment where advocating for queer people can be met with some very serious pushback, and even the experiences of LGBTQ plus people in a non-affirming space. So I'm going to be really careful while talking about all of these subjects, but I do want to be very clear that this is absolutely a time if you need to take a moment to leave this presentation or to stop watching, because these are subjects that really mean something to you in some very specific ways that could even be harmful. Please take this moment for yourself, for your mental health. That is what matters here. Um, I'm gonna feel perfectly fine, not offended at all, because this is a time for us to discuss together, to really engage together as a broader community here. So please take this time for your mental health, to understand and acknowledge if this is going to be a subject that could potentially cause triggers for you. Okay, so moving forward, let's talk about who I am. My name is Chris Ngugi. I'm Kenyan American. I live here in Michigan, where it's very cold. We get a bit more snow here than in California. I love cooking, adore cooking, baking, cooking, chopping, vegetables, everything. I'm a big fan of all of it. I'm also a really big fan of traveling. I've been traveling since I was a kid. Again, being Kenyan American, I've been in Kenya many, many times, and I even had the privilege and honor of being able to travel a bit when I was a kid to different countries around the world with my family. So I also study a number of different things, as was mentioned in my introduction. The fact that I study pre-law, I study Spanish, I study psychology, and the research that I'm doing, some of it has to do with anthropology and other forms of behavioral science work. And I'm just a really big fan of seeing all of these different ways, these modes of existence, and seeing how to move forward with them and learn more about them and feel passionate about them. I do eventually want to become a lawyer, that's true. But for right now, I'm just finishing up my undergrad, and I'll be graduating very, very soon, later this year. I'm very excited about that. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I am queer, I identify as queer, and I am an advocate for my community, or really all of my communities, because there are a number of different communities that I would confidently say that I am a part of. Okay, so this is the general rundown of what we're going to be discussing a bit more in this lavender lunch. We're going to be talking about what exactly the Seventh-day Adventist Church is, because this is not necessarily a denomination, a faith that everyone will be incredibly familiar with. We are also going to be discussing the project, The Rainbow in the Room, which is a community project done here in Berrien County in southwestern Michigan. And we're also going to be talking about what it means to be queer and in the church, in this case, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Okay, so first up, what is Seventh-day Adventism? Well, I'm so glad you asked. We're going to start with the basics, move on to what I really, really like about it, and then switch into things that I don't really like about it. Because in reality, especially with a faith that has the specific history and background of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but really something that we can understand from many different religious and cultural points of view, there are a lot of things that are incredibly positive and a lot of things that are a lot less positive. So we really want to acknowledge and understand all of that here today. First, talking about the basics, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is a second great awakening church. So, what does that mean? If you're familiar with some of the religious history of the United States, you may be familiar with the Second Great Awakening. This is a very significant time in American history where we got a lot of different faith groups, and some of the big ones are really still here into the present day. So the Seventh-day Adventist Church is one of them. The Jehovah's Witnesses are another. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is another. These are going to be the big three that people are the most familiar with. So the Seventh-day Adventist Church is one of those churches. It is Protestant. It is a global Christian denomination with about 22 million baptized members worldwide, with a really large scope of where people come from all around the world who are a part of this church. Some of the really unique parts of the church have to do with some of its specific beliefs. So, on one hand, the Seventh-day Adventist Church prescribes to a Saturday Sabbath. So, the holy day of the week, if you could call it that, would start Friday at sunset, and end Saturday at sunset. That's the 24-hour period that is called the Sabbath that the Seventh-day Adventist Church follows. It also has certain beliefs, including the belief of an unconscious state of the dead and a literal second advent. Okay, interesting facts about the Seventh-day Adventist Church. For one thing, in the United States, it is the most ethnically diverse religious group period, which is really fascinating given its history, especially as it started in the United States. But it's truly become an incredibly global church where people from all around the world uh, are a part of this church, and many of the people from all around the world have come to the United States. In my case, that would be my family who came from Kenya. But when they came from Kenya to the United States, they were already Seventh-day Adventist. So that's the story for many people that come to the United States and are part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church and continue to be a part of it while they're in the country. So it's also incredibly community oriented. If you go into any Seventh-day Adventist church around the world, you're going to experience a very specific kind of community. There are definitely times when that community can have some of the ups and downs of what it means to be in a community. So, for example, with increased community, this is kind of a standard thing that we learn in psychology and sociology. You can also get increased surveillance, as it were. People know more about you because of how tight-knit the community is. But on the other hand, you also get the benefits of a community of a community. You have some of the positives, which is also fascinating. But we can go into that a bit more later on. Another interesting thing about the Seventh-day Adventist Church is that many people in the church are vegetarian or vegan. Many people hold on to a very specific health message. In fact, the university where I currently go, Andrews University, is not going to be a place where you'll see meat actively served on campus. So if you're a vendor on campus or if you're the cafeteria, another entity that is on campus, you're not allowed to sell meat. You're also not supposed to engage in other kinds of areas where even though the law of Michigan would permit certain things in Andrews University, that wouldn't be permitted. So those would be things that have to do with substance use, alcohol use, that kind of thing. So another point that's also kind of interesting is that there is no idea of an eternal hell. When just going back to the idea of the unconscious state of the dead, when people die, they die effectively, and they don't go to hell or heaven directly. There is, of course, the other fact about the Sabbath being really a full rest day, and there is a large network around the world, and it's heavily pacifist. So if you've, I guess, watched the movie Hacksaw Ridge and learned more about someone like Desmond Doss, that would be kind of a standard depiction of what could be called a Seventh-day Adventist hero, per se, where someone is able to be in the space of Seventh-day Adventism and still be in the space of their broader context, but still hold on to their perspectives as a Seventh-day Adventist in that context, being someone who is peaceful, being someone who doesn't use arms, that kind of thing. Okay, so there's some much less interesting facts here, which are also very, very important to note here. So these, of course, come with a caveat that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is under Presbyterian polity. If you're not familiar with what that means, that basically means that there is a specific type of hierarchy in the church where the basic foundational brick is going to be the individual church. You're going to go from the church to a conference level, which covers many, many different churches. From the conference level, you'll go to a union level, to a division level, and finally to a general conference level. And at each level, you're going to be getting more and more churches. But the basic building block is going to still be that individual church, which means that in many situations, although the church overall may hold a perspective, for example, on abortion, on ordination, on different styles of worship, that doesn't mean that that is going to be the standard across all churches. That means that is the guideline that is given by the General Conference that people hope will be followed, but is not necessarily followed in many different circumstances and situations because the building block of the church is the individual church. So the individual church does have quite a bit of freedom in that area. But that's still something to keep in mind with the fact that there are a number of relatively negative facts that come along with the Seventh-day Adventist Church overall, or at least things that I would consider to be generally negative. Okay, so this is really interesting because my university, Andrews University, just like many other places around the United States and actually around the world, is going to see a pretty consistent rate of 1 in 10 students anonymously self-identifying as being LGBTQ+. That doesn't mean that is the full number of people who identify in this way, or even people who may be considered to be male androphilic or female gynophilic, which would be like an males who are attracted to other males, or females who are attracted to other females, or people who are transgender, people who are anywhere along the LGBTQ plus spectrum. This does not necessarily encapsulate everything because this is only what people are willing to write down effectively on a sheet. Even though it's anonymous, there is still stigma that is involved, which can seep into the ideas that individuals have about themselves. But generally speaking, based off of the information that we have, about 1 in 10 students at this very conservative institution, Andrews University, a Seventh-day Adventist institution, will anonymously self-identify as being LGBTQ+. Okay, so with all of that information, because it is a lot, and it's definitely a church that has many of the hallmarks of a more conservative church when it comes to ideas regarding sexuality, regarding gender, some of these different aspects of human identity. What does it mean to be queer or LGBTQ plus in a church of this nature? So one thing that I'm going to touch on before we even get to really answer that question fully is the idea of the rainbow in the room. So this is kind of what inspired the title of this Lavender lunch, the rainbow in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where the rainbow in the room is a community-oriented service. Really in a series of events that happen in this community where we're able to really discuss these topics and engage with these topics in a meaningful way. But what is a bit more about the rainbow in the room? And of course, all these pictures are taken with consent. A bit more of the rainbow in the room is that this is really just an event that is meant for people to engage in what in this community can be a tough subject. The subject of what does it mean to be LGBTQ plus, and what does it mean to take care of people who are LGBTQ plus in a responsible, caring way. Because it's not true that people will automatically respond in a way that is necessarily responsibly informed or is caring. So what does it mean to do that? What does it mean to engage in subjects such as the posture of care in the church? And how do you really address this, especially understanding that in our university, at least, 1 in 10 people are going to identify as being LGBTQ plus, and we don't know all of the statistics for everyone in the broader community. In my Berrien Springs community, Berrien Springs is the name of the town where that university is. So what does it mean for everyone in our broader community, which is heavily religious? What does it mean for people here, for us to engage in the subject of care for LGBTQ plus people? Okay, so there's much more to be said here. Absolutely, so much more to be said, but those are probably things that we can talk a bit more about towards the end or towards question time. But just overall, the Rainbow in the Room is an individual run event that is community oriented. It's also based on workshops that are giving a voice to people of all perspectives, as long as they present those perspectives respectfully and that those perspectives are taken with care. And we're trying to have people come together to address the topic of care for people in the LGBTQ plus community here in the broader Berrien Springs and Seventh-day Adventist community. These different events are generally held in small table talk environments where people are able to engage with people one-on-one in a community space where they can really be together and talk about these subjects that are very important, while they're also being in connection with professional presenters, people from our area, people from around the country who come here to Berrien Springs to talk about the subject of care for LGBTQ plus people in an informed, responsible way. Okay, so a little bit more about the origins of the rainbow in the room, and this is where we're going to talk a little bit more about that subject of conversion therapy. So again, please feel free to make your exit if you'd like to. We're not going to get too much into the weeds here, but this is definitely a subject that could be triggering. So. The idea behind the rainbow in the room originally was that there was a ministry or a group that was labeled a ministry that came to Berrien Springs, to the space just in front of the main entrance of my university. And they bought the building there and they decided to set up shop and they were going to hold sessions and hold space to be able to engage in what they would not label as conversion therapy, but could be considered and has received the accusation of at least being similar to what we would call conversion therapy. So, if you're familiar with some of the recent trends and what conversion therapy means in the United States now, of course, there are still some classic forms of conversion therapy, but there are also many cases where there's a more like modern twist to what conversion therapy means, or what I may call conversion therapy, where people are attempting to convince others to instead of just directly turning into a straight person or a cisgender person, turning into someone who reflects the character of God. So some of those words, some of those phrasings are meant to evade the subject of conversion therapy in this space, but that doesn't take away from the fact that at a minimum, some of the ideas that are held by ministry groups, such as coming together ministries, could fall in pretty neatly into what at least I would define as conversion therapy. So this, of course, happened in my community, and we had many talks with the university, with various administrators, that kind of thing, to really see if there was a way that we could address this subject. Because in a place like Andrews University, in a Seventh-day Adventist space, there are already not going to be too many resources for people to begin with. And even more so is this evident and seen as potentially harmful in the presence of an alternative source of information that people could be getting, which would be coming from Coming Together Ministries, this ministry that has bought this building just across from the university. So, of course, my original goal, along with my very good friend Aaron Beers, we were able to have conversations with people at the university to see if we could do something, really anything. And really, the long story short is that nothing was going to happen. There was simply not going to be someone outside of us who was going to be able to really address this head on in the way that we thought it really needed to be addressed. Because something that at least approximates conversion therapy has so much room to do such incredible harm in a community where subjects such as care for LGBTQ plus individuals, it's already something that is not spoken about. And people who have various concerns about their own family members or have different ideas that are attached to things that may not even be in line with different faith teachings, but maybe personal teachings. There are just many different places where people can and have fallen into some pretty standard and very harmful responses to people being LGBTQ plus people in the community, to having LGBTQ plus family members, this kind of thing. So how can we really address this? Of course, after our conversations, after we realized nothing is going to happen, unfortunately, at the university, we then decided to do kind of our own thing. Of course, following the rules of the university, we made sure to know all of the guidelines very well, the student handbook, everything, to make sure that we weren't stepping on any toes, really. And we worked together to come up with the idea of the rainbow in the room. Actually, Aaron, my friend, is the person who came up with the title, The Rainbow in the Room, which was fantastic. And we came together and we decided to host our first meeting. Our first meeting was in the community. It was at the public library, and we had a bunch of people who we considered leaders in the community, whether they were student leaders or other community leaders, come together where we were able to really discuss this subject of what happens now that there is this other ministry and what is happening in the context of how we can address the subject of care for LGBTQ plus individuals in a responsible, care-informed way. And it was fantastic. It went really, really well. And partly because it went so well, we felt encouraged to do more. We did at that event have a showing of the documentary 1946, which is also fantastic. But yeah, we had snacks, we had food, we had conversation, and it was really a helpful conversation where we were able to come together in some very meaningful, helpful ways. And of course, since that point, because there was so much positive engagement at our first event, we've had more events. Over the past year, we had a couple of other events where we covered a number of different topics, ranging from how do we treat people to mental health needs in Berrien, to LGBTQ plus individuals in our community, the subject of what is affirmative care, what does it mean to care in different cultural contexts, especially understanding the incredible ethnic and cultural diversity that exists in our community here in Berrien Springs, in the Seventh-Day Adventist Church overall, just understanding what this really means for people here. So the other positive thing, talking about some of the results, is we were able to do all these things, have some really positive engagement in our community. Over the different events that we were able to have, just over 10%, I believe close to 12% of the Berrien Springs community, everyone in our town, was able to come to one of our three events, which was fantastic. We had plenty of physical pie. The different ways that we were trying to arrange our events were scheduled around the idea of participant idea exchanges, which is more or less just, a small table talk. And of course, because of that, we had to have pie. So we had pie for everyone every single time. We had fantastic snacks. We had tote bags. We had drinks. We had booklets. We had pamphlets. We even understood that there are resources even within our church that are helpful for people to understand. And we just got a bunch of them. We just got as many resources as we could to reach out to as many people as we could. We went into our community physically. We went into local businesses, local churches to pass out these pamphlets, to talk to people about this subject, to really engage with our full community in a very intentional way. And we were able to do that. We were able to also get presenters from all around. Some of them were Seventh-day Adventist, some of them were very much not Seventh-day Adventist, but everyone was coming from a place of expertise, a place of knowledge where they were able to share with this Berrien Springs Seventh-day Adventist community more about what it means to care for people in a truly informed, responsible way. And we were even able to have people fly in from as far as Florida and as far as New York. We had people from universities around the country, from different advocacy groups, and all these different places come together to be able to really talk about the subject from many different perspectives, including a pastoral perspective, including a mental health perspective, including many different areas that are incredibly important to understanding the full scope of this topic, this theme of care for LGBTQ plus individuals in this kind of community. And thankfully, after every single event, we've had just overwhelmingly positive experiences shared by our participants, which have, of course, encouraged us to keep going. People constantly have been sharing about how this is such a new kind of community space in our community, especially since this is, again, not a subject that is brought up very much in this kind of community. But we are really trying to talk about this rainbow in the room, and we've been able to get pretty far, which is fantastic. And a lot of engagement has also happened in our community. But of course, that doesn't take away from the fact that this is still very, very complicated. In a community such as this one, that is Seventh-day Adventist, that is very much non-affirming in many different ways, but still trying to understand ways to talk about those gaps, talk about those connections, talk about those belief systems, and really engage with them in a responsible, helpful, informed way where people kind of, regardless of where they fit on this religious spectrum, because Seventh-day Adventists are a very diverse group, not only in ethnicity, but also in thought. How can we get people from very different ranges of thought to come together and talk with each other openly, honestly, as a community, as we can all grow together in this community? Okay, so this is a really big question here, which is how exactly can or how exactly are queer identifying individuals in the SDA church and in SDA spaces such as Andrews University able to find the connection, the ability to reconcile or find peace within their contexts? This is a really big question that a lot of people have, whether it is from coming to the events or it is from being in the university. Just there are many different people that have this really important question. How exactly are people able to reconcile these different parts of themselves? Or how are they able to live in a state of peace when maybe they're not able to reconcile? Or what does it mean to maybe not even be able to do that? What does it mean to simply exist in a space that is non-affirming, and know that you're going to be here for an extended period of time? For most students, that'll be 4 or 5 years, at least in undergrad, if they're not going to graduate school here. And what does it mean to be able to find, again, peace in that situation? So this kind of leads into my personal favorite research project. There are a couple of different research projects I've been able to be a part of as an undergraduate student, but this is honestly my favorite, absolutely, which is one that talks about really addressing this subject, addressing this question of what does it mean to talk about this connection between being LGBTQ plus and being religious or not being religious. What is that? What does that mean for people in this kind of space? So of course, the way that I'm doing this is just having interviews, qualitative interviews where I'm just trying to engage with people and talk with other people in the community to see where everyone is, to see their experiences in their own words, because a research project of this specific nature just hasn't really been done in the SDA church. Although other quantitative studies that are kind of limited in scope have been done, no study of this specific nature has been done, where we're trying to really try to have these interviews to understand the practical application of these experiences, of this tie-in of being queer, of being religious, of being in an SDA space, of being non-religious, of all these things together, talking about how these tie together for university and college students across different SDA colleges and universities around the United States. And for no, there are 12 Seventh-day Adventist universities in the United States and over 100 worldwide. Okay, so some of the results are showing that there are some really big differences, but there are some very consistent themes as well. So, for one thing, if you're able to read some of these different quotes that we have up here, if they're not too small, one of them shares that this individual was not able to sit through a sermon without crying or feeling trapped like a fox in a cage, which is something that I think a lot of people can relate to, absolutely. And just as a note, all of the quotes here are coming from research that's already been published, not from research that's ongoing. But another quote that comes from someone else is the idea that Adventism does not teach anyone how to handle queer people, besides saying that they're wrong. And it needs to be so much more than just telling people how to follow a rule. It literally, the roots of it are built on the fact of having conversations with people, and you just don't have that. So many of these, actually all of these, in one way or another, are quotes that come from people that are particularly negative, that have some very negative undertones because of the experiences that people have had within this kind of space. But something that's also interesting within this research is the fact that with this understanding, it's also true that a number of individuals who may have some of these experiences continue to identify as being Seventh-day Adventist. And that sounds really complicated. It sounds really different. And what does that mean for people? Well, for a lot of people, going into some of the research so far, that means that they've had to change what it means to be Seventh-day Adventist for them. What does it mean to be Seventh-day Adventist for me? Or what does it mean to engage in this religious community in this way? What does it mean to exist as a student at this Adventist university in this way and still hold on to something that's very important to me, my faith, my community? These are things that people feel are very, very important in their lives and they don't necessarily want to give up. So what does it mean to find a way to have this reconciliation happen where we're able to find these ties, we're able to find a way to feel okay with the fact that sometimes it really isn't okay. How are we able to find community in spaces that are in between? In some ways, is in between the ways that we experience queerness and the ways that we experience religion. How can we find these spaces and how can we make them adequate and helpful and uplifting for people? The basic results of the study so far, and of course, there is more research that is ongoing, including from students that are here in Michigan or are from different parts of the United States, such as California and Florida. But the general idea really comes to this point of whether people stay in the church or leave it, we are all looking for community. That's why we're here to try to give people a community while educating and communicating with those around us. That is really the biggest point of the Rainbow in the Room, trying to make this space one that is helpful for others, edifying for others, where we're able to talk about these subjects and talk about informing different individuals on these subjects, while also understanding that this is not just a space for informing. This is also a space for community. This is a space where we are to be together, where we are eating and we're laughing and we're joking and we're able to have some light moments, even though not all moments are going to be light. How are we able to make that space together? And that is another big reason why the idea of being an LGBTQ plus or being queer in this kind of community can be a very, very specific kind of experience. For many, it's negative in some ways, and for many, it's positive in some ways. And in the end, we all come to our own resolutions. We all come to our own places where we decide what we are going to believe. And if we use a label such as Christian, such as Seventh-day Adventist, such as anything else that you could fill in there, um, what does it mean to engage with that label? What does it mean to be a part of this community under this label? And what does it mean to do so responsibly and do so in a way that is not only for ourselves, but possibly even helping in service of other people? How are we able to not only find spaces for us, but again, have spaces where we can be very intentional about making sure everyone feels like we can be a community together? Thank you so much for listening to my talk, and I'm very happy to hear any questions, comments, concerns that anyone has on this subject. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Please feel free to unmute yourselves. We're a small group, or if you prefer, put your question in the chat box. And I'm collecting a few questions from Facebook. So anyone, please feel free to start off the conversation if you'd like.
Well, hello, my name is Obed Vasquez. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
My name is Obed Vasquez, and I really want to commend you for your presentation and actually your bravery for trying to survive at Andrews. Self-disclosure, I graduated from Andrews in 1977, so I had 4 wonderful years there. In spite of knowing one is gay, living there in the community with how you ended is actually what we also described in our life, for the last 50 years. So I really like, and see your courage to do this work. So it's very admirable. It would be nice to you ended in a nice note, because the idea that living in that particular place and having the faith and having the beliefs is really challenged, because if people know that you are gay or you have leanings or you have interests, right, you're going to be judged. And so you're put in a box. And so you have to decide day by day, moment by moment, how you're going to react to that, how are you going to respond, how do you, along with others, and how does that affect your faith day by day? And so, I'd like to hear a little bit more of that particular challenge that you have on the one-to-one. I love the picture right where you have yourself in front of Meyer Hall. Meyer Hall still exists, so it's kind of nice to see that there. But that reminded me of the everyday struggle that everyone, at least that I know, have their, while living there at Andrews. So I do have wonderful memories. There are wonderful moments. Certainly, it nurtured my spirituality. And over the years, part of what's kept me part of the faith is the community. It's not necessarily the beliefs, but it's the community members, and a lot of people are coming out of Andrews. Just so you know, we had a group here in San Francisco, where I'm at, that also, wanted to look for gay and lesbian, and in this our case, adults who are looking for a place for worship. And so we did that for about 7 or 8 years because there was a need. So that need continues. So that idea of trying to find the experience of the young people in the church, in the campus, studying and still trying to keep their faith and balancing all of that is really, really important. So if you could tell me a little bit more about, let's say, just your day-to-day experience, that would be fabulous. Part of that is also I'm a sociologist. I went on, even though I graduated in chemistry, I became a sociologist, and I just recently retired, so I have the luxury of being on this call.
Congratulations. I also just had a quick question. Are you by any chance familiar uh, with the documentary Seventh-Day Adventist?
Yes, I am one of the three couples that's highlighted in the movie.
Okay, because you were talking about your experience, and that really reminded me of some of the things I remember watching there. So thank you again for your question. This is fantastic, and I'd be happy to answer. So for me, day to day, what this means is possibly a little bit different than it may have been. One big thing that has changed is possibly access to different sources of information. So, for example, one reason that we were even able to have a rainbow in the room was the fact that we had so much access to information about where are the people who can even present at a rainbow in the room? How can we learn this information about the people who are here, who are engaging, who are interested in this kind of subject and would be willing to come to Berrien Springs to talk about this subject? And these are things that are a lot easier to do now. And this ties into one theme that comes up in the research that I'm currently doing on the qualitative experiences of LGBTQ plus people. Simply having that access to the internet, whether it's YouTube or it's Instagram or it's TikTok, all of these different things make it a lot, maybe easier isn't the right word, but add a lot uh, to help in the experiences of trying to make sense of everything over time. So having that access to social media, to the internet, to these different sources of information, make it a lot easier to be able to learn and grow with other people and possibly just by researching things. So having that access makes that day to day easier, along with the fact that, of course, there is a lot of nuance, as I'm sure you're very aware. Um, Andrews University is incredibly diverse, not only in ethnicity again, but in the ways that people think about many different subjects. So the way that you may expect that someone engages in a topic in one department is not going to be the same way that you may expect that they engage with that topic in a different department. And there are different places of campus where things are more or less complicated. But overall, I think that's something that many people in the church, including myself, can definitely take into that day to day, is possibly just understanding what it means to exist in these different spaces within this SDA circle overall, because it doesn't just mean one thing. It means many different things at many different times. At one time, it could mean that I could be like out and proud, as it were, or in other times it means that I'm probably going to go about my day and probably not do or say anything that would draw too much attention. And it really just means different things from day to day. And what that feels like is also very different from person to person, from day to day. It really seriously depends in many different ways. I would say that overall for myself, especially being able to come to the resolutions where I've been able to come to, I don't necessarily feel um, angst or some kind of anxiety around the different ways that it means to exist as a Seventh-day Adventist in different spaces. I think that you kind of learn to be fluent in the language of understanding how to engage in those spaces. And in some ways, for many people, that could be a negative. And for some people, that could be relatively positive, and for other people, it's probably in the middle. I think for me, in some ways, it's probably in the middle, where in some ways it's okay to understand that different cultural perspectives will come with different ideas on the subject. And on the other hand, of course, there are ways that that can impact you as an individual. So probably not the most satisfying, cleanest answer, but the real answer is that it's complicated and it depends.
Thank you. Yes.
We have a question in the chat, Chris. This is from Dundee. Great presentation. Through your interviews, have you seen the phenomenon of queer Christians not expressing their sexuality within their faith communities because they don't want to force others to confront their own feelings? A theme that has emerged from my research is Black queer Christians silence themselves to protect others.
Yeah, so this is a big question, absolutely. Um, yeah, 100%. I think that that's something that we absolutely see, where even going back to that last question that I was answering, where in some spaces, yes, you're not necessarily going to be expressing your sexuality in the way that it's the most meaningful or helpful for you in some different spaces. And that's true in multiple different spaces within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I would say that in my research, I have definitely caught on to that, where the way that people will engage in certain spaces is not the same as they'll engage in other spaces. And when they're in their faith communities, um, many people choose to either distance themselves as much as possible from the faith community. Even though they are, of course, in Andrews University, they'll distance themselves as much as possible. Or if they will engage in the community, they will likely, in some ways, not express parts of their identity to possibly self-censor and possibly protect themselves as individuals, which is a really complicated thing. So one really interesting point that you brought up is the experience of Black queer Christians, and it's really fascinating because Andrews University, being Seventh-day Adventist, which, as we noted before, is the most ethnically diverse religious group in the United States, more diverse than than general groups within Islam, within Christianity, Catholicism, different Protestant denominations, all of the religious groups in America, if you take them together, the most ethnically diverse group is going to be the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And partly because of that alone, we see a big difference in the ways in which people engage in this subject in their faith communities, in these different spaces, in these different communities. So someone in one space, which is maybe a bit more where there will be like more white people in this space, or there will be more people who identify as being Black, or may identify as being Asian. There are different spaces where people feel different levels of comfort, and there is absolutely a big difference. Where for one thing, part of my research is people come to me directly to be interviewed because I can't ask anyone. I can't be too forward about the ways that I present information about my research. I just need to make sure that everyone is like completely 100% consenting and going out of their way to come find me to be interviewed. Partly because of that, even the groups that may choose to come more often to be interviewed, um, may also reflect some differences in the ethnic groups on our campus, where some may feel more comfortable even going out of their way to find an interviewer, and some may feel a lot less comfortable, depending partly on their ethnic racial background within that space of Seventh-day Adventism. So absolutely, yes, I've definitely seen that phenomenon. And I think thankfully in a lot of ways that's changing for a lot of people, where even you can see in the research that I'm doing so far that a lot of people are able to find communities within the Seventh-day Adventist Church where they can express who they are fully and authentically, and they feel comfortable being Seventh-day Adventist. But not everyone is able to do that. So that experience is very different for a lot of people. But yes, I have seen that phenomenon.
Can I follow up on that same question? Because college is a time, especially, Christians and being queer, let's say an Adventist context, that time that you're there is a time of growth, time of discovery. It's a time of you make decisions about yourself. Um, and so when you leave, you're not the same young person that you started. And so I wonder, in your interviews, does anybody um, speak about what they're going to do afterwards? Do they return to their home communities, or is that too dangerous for them, or is that safe for them? Have they expressed that in how they're going to engage in their community afterwards?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And many of the people who are coming to be interviewed are people who've really, really engaged with this, where they came to college the first day expecting that it would be one way, and they're halfway through, and it is not that way at all. Where they may have come and expected that they were just not going to express this part of themselves, and they were not going to acknowledge this, and they were just going to try to be something that they maybe weren't. And then it turned out that actually, no, I am able to find friends that are okay with this, and I am able to find resources, and I am okay with this, and I want to express it in this way. So that's a big thing that people have definitely noted. And at the end of every interview, or towards the end of every interview, I ask a question that talks about how people see their relationship with their religiosity and with their sexuality, their gender identity, all of these different factors. How do they see that changing, staying the same, continuing? How do they see that happening? And many people do note very different directions, where people expect that either if they're going to engage in anything, it'll be that they expect that if anything will change, their religiosity will actually go down. And for other people, they expect that if anything will change, they will actually increase their religiosity. People have very, very different ideas um, about how they will engage with these subjects when they go back into their home communities, which is also very fascinating. In fact, there there are even times when some of the complication that comes with I guess coming out to family members, being openly queer in different church spaces, that can be a very hard experience, but for some people, that even brings them closer to God. So their relationship with their faith actually grows stronger. And for other people, that means that it's becoming weaker because why would a loving God allow this to happen? There are very, very different ways that people engage in this subject overall, and ways that they expect things will change moving into the future, like when they go back to their communities.
Hi, Chris. I wanted to say hello. My name is Lewis Knox. I am a first year MDiv student at Pacific School of Religion. And like you, I see that you were pre-law. I have a law background. I attended law school a few years ago. One of the things I was thinking about as I was watching this conversation is that, my background, I attend a predominantly LGBT church for the last 33 years. I don't know if you're familiar with City of Refuge in San Francisco first and now in Oakland. Um, and we created the church in 1991 so that there would be a safe space for folks in the LGBT community. My experience growing up in first a Baptist church, and then I have been in, Church of God in Christ Pentecostal church, is that Black churches often play this game. It's called, don't ask, don't tell, where you know folks are gay, but as long as they don't say they're gay, then it's not a problem. The moment they say they're gay outwardly, then that becomes a problem, right? I'm sure one of you, if you've seen that in your work. At City of Refuge, of course, we created a space where people could be who they are all the time. And it's been 30 years ago, it was seen as really cutting edge. I think now, after 33 years, and the work that Dr. Bernie has done and so many other people have done to bring inclusivity into the church environment, that is slowly changing. And in the Black church, it's slowly changing, but not at a fast enough pace. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I just wanted to say hello. It's good to see Professor Bernie here and all of you other folks. I just wanted to check in because I just finished a class and wanted to race to my office to be with you guys.
Thanks for being here, Louis.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And good luck to you in your studies. Have you decided you're going to go to law school after this? Are you?
Yeah, I plan to go to law school pretty soon after this.
That's
I'll
fantastic.
be off for a couple of years and then I'll go to law school. Yeah.
Thank you. And you can be out in law school. I got to tell you, I went to a Jesuit law school, and they had an LGBT club while we were there. The undergraduate students did not and desired to have one, and the administration said no. And so the students then came to those of us in law school and said, "Hey, would you help us out?" And as soon as the law students wrote a letter to the administration reminding them what might happen if they persist in that position, the undergraduate students immediately got a gay, a lesbian, a transgender club. And so it's great to be able to see how activism can change things. And so at PSR, we are studying to be agents of change, and it's great that you will continue that history also. So good luck to you in that regard.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
We have time for a couple more questions. Let me have at least one from Facebook. Someone asks, are there individual SDA congregations that are officially welcoming of queer people, and do they, I think they mean advertise that to the outside world?
Yeah, so this is slightly complicated, but the technical answer is both yes and no. Because again, the church overall does have some very specific viewpoints on this, along with many other subjects. And with this understanding of those viewpoints, technically speaking, all churches in the global church are meant to follow these guidelines. But that doesn't not necessarily mean that all churches follow them in the same ways, because people do have freedom of interpreting things in different ways within their context as an individual church within the conference body just above them. So as long as they're able to come to a conclusion where they're able to have an interpretation that works well within their understanding of scripture, within their understanding of Seventh-day Adventist tenets, yes, technically speaking, yes, but also no, but also yes. So there are actually churches like that where you can find people engaging in these kinds of conversations, sometimes on smaller scales, but generally speaking, they will be in very specific churches where, although they're not advertised per se, it's very clear that these churches are meant for this thing, or these churches are accepting in this way. And in fact, there's actually an organization called Kinship that is meant to engage with people in very different communities, especially within the SDA Church overall, whether they're current members or ex-members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church who identify as LGBTQ+. And in these spaces provided by Kinship, they also provide some resources. And one of those resources, if you find the Kinship website, happens to be a list of churches where they are accepting churches within the context of Seventh-day Adventism. So it's not as though things are being actively, again, advertised, but there are definitely churches where people are much safer and are feeling like they're able to engage properly with their religious community in ways that do not take away from who they are as people, as individuals, as they engage in this broader faith community together. So for a number of individuals, those spaces are really helpful. Now, I will also note that there are so many Seventh-day Adventist churches around the world and in the United States, and most of them are not going to be on that list. Most of them are just not going to be on that list. Most of them are going to be in communities like the one that I'm in, where you're not going to find a church of this nature, where there are a lot of things that could be happening behind closed doors, but no direct conversations, no direct talking about what is happening and how can we properly, responsibly engage with this subject matter in a helpful way. That is not happening in most spaces, but there are some where it is. So that is kind of the answer to that question.
Thank you. We have time for one more question or comment. And incidentally, if you are interested in receiving our newsletter, please feel free to put your email address in there. Anyone in the room like to say anything, question, comment? Feel free to unmute yourself. And if not, give some time here. Want to thank you so much, Chris, for this, and also to share with folks two upcoming events we have next Tuesday. Our Latinx Roundtable has Professor Ish Ruiz speaking on queer Latinx spirituality, identity, liminality, and activism. That's next Tuesday. And then next Thursday, trans-religious leadership in challenging times. Both of those should be good, I think. And check out our website, CLGS.org, for future programs. And thank you for being here today. And Chris, again, thank you for your wonderful presentation, for your engagement with all of us here in the room and on Facebook. And yeah, hope to see all of you at another CLGS program.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This is truly a wonderful community.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody.
Good to see you, Dr. Bernie.